Hi, welcome back to McClutchy Maths. My name is Natalie McClutchy, and today we're continuing our consumer arithmetic series by looking at budgeting. In this video, you'll find out what a budget is and why you would want to have one, different types of expenses, and then I'm going to take you through a few worked examples using Microsoft Excel. So you're going to want to have an Excel spreadsheet, a blank one, open in the background, ready to work along with me. This particular video is aimed at students in grade 11 maths right across Australia, as well as students who are studying business and adults as well. I'm sure everybody needs to know how to create a budget for themselves.
Many people create budgets in real life situations. The budget might be for a household to help manage everyday expenses. The budget might be for a business to project or forecast profits. The budget might be for a project such as catering a birthday party, renovating a room in a house, or a major construction project. Budgets help people to control their expenses, plan for the future, and work towards their financial goals. Budgets are typically split up into three main parts. Firstly, there are sources of income. In a household, this could be money earned from work, such as wages and salaries. It could be money earned from investments, such as rent from an investment property or dividends from shares. It could also be money provided by the government, such as family assistance or Centrelink payments. Expenses are a very important part of a budget. These are divided into two categories, fixed and variable. Fixed expenses are those expenses that do not change with consumption or usage. For example, rent or mortgage payments will be the same every week. Other examples of fixed expenses could be subscriptions like Netflix, monthly phone plan charges, monthly internet charges, insurance, car registration, council rates, or weekly gym memberships, to name a few. Just because these charges are the same every period doesn't mean they will never increase or decrease, but typically they are locked in at the same predictable price for a period of time, usually specified by a contract. Variable costs are ones that vary with consumption or usage. This could include your petrol bill, which will be different every week depending on how far you have driven, as well as the price of petrol. It would include your grocery bill, as well as other household expenses like clothing, electricity, entertainment, holidays, and household maintenance. These costs can be hard to predict. They don't always occur at the same time, and they change from bill to bill. Another way of further breaking down variable expenses is into essentials and discretionary. Essentials will be expenses that must be paid in order to live, such as electricity and water bills. Discretionary expenses are those ones which you have more control over. You can decide whether to get your lashes done or whether to go to a concert or not. These could be considered luxuries to some extent. However you decide to group your expenses, the important thing to remember is that income less total expenses should be a positive number. This is equal to your savings. If expenses exceed your income, then your budget is in deficit, which is not desirable. Typically, if your budget is in the red or in deficit, the best thing to do is to target your luxuries. Can these be reduced in any way to save money? Then review your other variable costs. Can you fill up on petrol on a different day to save money? Could you turn appliances off at night or fix a leaking tap to reduce your water bill? Lastly, you should investigate your fixed costs. If your contract with your phone or your internet provider is about to expire, perhaps it's time to look for a better plan that will save you money. If your rent is unaffordable, could you renegotiate it with your landlord or look for somewhere cheaper to live? These kinds of expenses are typically harder to reduce because you are often locked in for a period of time defined by a contract.
Hello, I'm down the bottom here this time. I'm going to take you through three worked examples of budgets. Our first example is a household budget. Now, I would highly recommend that you pause the video right here, split your screen so that you've got Excel open on one side and me open on the other side. Set up your particular Excel spreadsheet, a blank one, with the same headings that I've got here. I'm going to talk you through, while you're doing that, just a few key aspects of a budget. Firstly is organisation. It really needs to be set up and presented in an organised manner, not just bits of numbers all over the place. Notice I've started with a heading and I've made that heading bold and underlined and also a little bit larger so that it stands out. I've got 4 different headings across the top: weekly, monthly, quarterly, and yearly. And the reason for this is that sometimes we get expenses that are weekly expenses, like our groceries. We get monthly expenses, like our Netflix subscription. We get quarterly bills, like our council rates, and sometimes our water bill or our electricity bill. And then sometimes we have yearly particular bills. For example, your car registration only comes in once a year. So I've set those 4 particular columns up. I'm going to take you through the various formulas that you need in order to be able to set your budget up properly. On the left-hand side, you'll notice I've got a first subheading, income, and all the different kinds of income that I'm including in this particular example. There are multiple types of income that your household could have, so you need one for each different kind. You also need a total underneath that so that we can add those together. Our next subheading is expenses, and then I've got a second subheading underneath that one, fixed expenses, and I'm going to be putting the fixed expenses underneath those with a subtotal under that. Then I've got another subheading called variable expenses, some more variable expenses under that with another subheading, and then underneath that one I've got in capitals total expenses, and that way I'm going to add my fixed expenses to my variable expenses. Now at this stage I haven't put in anything for savings. We'll do that one together. So if we're ready to go, we're going to start by putting some information in. So firstly, in this particular example, I'm going to make up some numbers. Let's say my salary is $1,000 a week. Let's say that I earn $100 of dividends every year, and I get my rent comes monthly from my real estate agent for an investment property that I have, and they send me $1,000 a month. Okay, so far I've got some numbers in here. Let's continue with our expenses, and then we'll go back and we'll put some formulas in. So Netflix, my subscription's $20 a month. My phone and internet plan would be $80 a month. Council rates come quarterly, and we're going to call that one $400 a quarter. And my mortgage gets paid weekly, and we'll call that one $500 a week. So you might want to pause here just so that you can keep up with me. I'm pretty speedy on the keyboard, and you kind of want that in case you are as well. Okay, electricity, I get a quarterly electricity bill, and that's around the $400 mark. Groceries, we'll call that $300 a week. Hairdresser, I go to the hairdresser once a month, and that's going to cost me, say, $120. And entertainment. Now, entertainment's a tricky one. I don't always go to the movies every week, or I don't always go and see a concert. So I'm going to do a bit of an estimate of what that would be for the whole year, and we'll just basically put aside $1,000 to entertain myself. Okay, so now I've got all the numbers in. Now what I need to do is make sure that I've got some formulas. It's not good enough to just submit a budget with just random numbers in different places. We really want to have a figure for every different item that's weekly, monthly, quarterly, and yearly, and that way I've got a weekly budget, a monthly budget, a quarterly budget, and a yearly budget. So firstly, let's set up this yearly column here. So we're coming into cell E4 now. And I've got my weekly amount now. There's 52 weeks in 1 year. So people think there's 50. There's not. There's 52. So I'm going to type the equals sign into the cell. Now the equals sign tells Excel that it's a formula. So if I just typed in some numbers, it would not actually do anything. So I need to tell it I'm going to do a calculation, equals first. Now I'm going to click on the cell, which is that weekly amount there, and I'm going to tell it to multiply it by 52. So I need to press the asterisk button. That's the little star that you see above your 8 number. Now the asterisk is what we use in Excel for multiplying. We don't use the little cross button, the letter X. It treats that like it's a letter. And we're now going to type in how many weeks there are in a year. There's 52. Okay, now I'm going to copy this formula now to every weekly cost that I've got, all the way down here. So you can see I've got weekly amounts for my mortgage and a weekly amount for my hairdressers. But before I do that, I actually want to fill in these cells here as well in C and D, and that way I can copy those whole sections down for all the same types of costs. So quarterly, I'm going to take my yearly amount now and I'm going to divide it by 4 because there's 4 quarters in a year. So I type in equals, click on the yearly amount. Now you'll notice on your keyboard there's no divide button. It's actually the / button, which is down towards the bottom of your keyboard. So I'm going to divide it by 4 and it will calculate that for me automatically. And then I'm going to press the equals button in the monthly and take that yearly amount again and divide it by 12. Now, a common misconception that people have is that there's 4 weeks in a month. There is not. There's 4 1/3 on average. Every month has a different amount of days, and the year itself, sometimes there's different amounts of days in the years as well. So what we do is we convert that weekly amount to a yearly amount first, and then we take it backwards to a monthly amount. So we're going to multiply it by 52 weeks and then divide it by 12 months. Okay, so now we've got a monthly, a quarterly, and a yearly amount for my salary. I'm now going to highlight those 3 cells because I want to copy these 3 formulas to all of the other weekly expenses, and that way I don't have to do this process every single line. So I'm going to do Control C on my keyboard. You might right click and press the copy button. And you'll notice there's like these little marching ants around all three cells. So what that's telling you is that I'm actually performing something on all three of those cells. And now where I've got my mortgage, notice it's a weekly expense, I'm going to type Control V, which pastes the formulas, and then do the same again for groceries, Control V. So if I look in these particular cells now, and for example, if I want to look at groceries and check my formula, if I click up in the cell, it'll actually highlight the cells that it's referencing. And that makes it very easy for me to do some troubleshooting. Okay, let's come back up the top now. Now I've got a yearly cost, and I want to backfill that into the weekly, monthly, and quarterly cells. So firstly, I'm going to start in the weekly column. I'm going to put equals in for a formula, take the yearly amount, and divide it by 52. And then I'm going to do the same with the monthly column, equals yearly divided by 12, and then equals yearly divided by 4. It is a little bit tedious. But now I'm going to copy this information, Control C, down to all of my ones that have a yearly expense. The only other one I've got is entertainment, and now entertainment's filled. So now I'm left with some monthly expenses and some quarterly expenses, and I need to make sure that I'm filling up my spreadsheet with those informations. So firstly, let's take the monthly amount and convert that into a yearly amount. Equals that one there times 12. It's always easy to do yearly and then work backwards. Okay, there's 4 quarters in a year, so I'm going to divide this one by 4. And there's 52 weeks in a year, so I'm going to divide this one by 52. So now I've got formulas in those 3 cells. I'm going to copy Control C down to my other, hang on, what were we doing? We were doing, monthly expenses. I actually need to copy this one first. Okay, if I copy that whole row down, it's actually going to copy the amount as well. I don't want that to happen. So let's just copy the weekly one down for my 2 monthly ones. And then we're actually going to copy this last section, which are also formulas, down for monthly there as well. Very important that we don't overwrite our information. Okay, so now all I'm left with are these 2 quarterly expenses that I need to divide up. Now because these are the same number, I can actually just copy the whole row. But if they were different numbers, I'd need to do it like I did before, little bits at a time. Okay, so let's take this one here, the yearly, divide that one, times that one by 4. And then we're going to take the yearly amount, divide it by 12. And then the yearly amount and divide it by 52. And then I can copy this row down to my electricity row. Now you'll notice that I've got numbers for all of my expenses, but I don't have any totals yet. So what I'm going to do is come back into this cell here, and I want to add up my weekly budget. So if I come over to the right hand side, you'll see where it says auto sum. There's a funny looking E. It's actually a Greek E epsilon. If I click on that button, it's automatically going to add that column for me, which is wonderful. So I press the enter button and it's done. Now I'm going to actually click and drag this across so I don't have to repeat that process 4 times. So I'm going to move my mouse. Notice at the moment it's a white cross. If I move it to the bottom right hand corner, it becomes a black cross. And then if I hold my shift button down, I can actually drag that across with my mouse. Okay, and we're going to repeat that process here as well. So work along with me here. We're going to add the first one, and then we're going to click and drag that across. Do the same for our variable expenses. Sum those up, press the enter button, and then click and drag that across. Now I need another formula here. I need to add up my 2 expenses, fixed expenses and variable expenses. So I'm going to do an equals again to tell Excel that it's a formula. I'm going to take the first fixed expense and then I'm going to press the plus button and add on the next variable expense. Now you'll notice that I can't do it. It's not letting me move into that cell. It's easier if you do it with your mouse because it kind of overcovers it. Press enter and we're done. And now it's the same formula for all the way along. We're going to actually click and drag that across. Now you'll notice that my headings disappear when I scroll down. Sometimes that's quite frustrating, especially if you've got a very big worksheet. So what you want to do is something called splitting. So what I'm going to do is put my mouse up into this cell up here, and that way, when I scroll all the way to the bottom, the weekly, monthly, quarterly, and yearly titles will stay in the right spot. So I'm going to click on View now, and there's this little box here that's called Freezing the Panes. And if I freeze the panes, you'll notice it puts like a little black cross on the screen. And when I scroll down now, scroll, you'll notice that those headings stay in the same spot. Now, if I want to undo that, I go back to the View menu, click on the Freeze Panes again, and I unfreeze the panes. If I put it in the wrong spot, you can do it that way and then pop yourself in the right spot. We're actually going to scroll a bit down now because I want to have my savings here. So I'm going to have a new heading, Savings. We'll type that in together. It should be in bold, and these should be in bold as well. And it's basically going to be equals for a formula, the income amount, take away my total expenses, and press the Enter button. And then I'm going to click and drag that across for all of them. Now you'll notice that it's a bit of a messy spreadsheet still because I've got some things with 1 decimal place, no decimal place, some with more than 2. So we want them to be consistent. So if I go back to my main home menu and highlight all of my information, I'm going to tell it I want dollar signs. And it automatically gives me 2 decimal places and gives everything a dollar sign with a comma. And let's say I decide that I don't want 2 decimal places, I only want no decimal places. I can use this one here, this one with the little decimals, to decrease the amount of decimals that are shown. Okay, so that's my first worked example, a budget. Okay, we're now going to move on to the second worked example here, and it's an event. Now you may want to quickly pause here and copy down this spreadsheet so that you're able to keep pace with me. So I'm actually planning a wedding here. You'll notice that I've got these 2 fields up here, and these are 2 fields that are done in yellow. The reason why I've highlighted them in yellow is because they are amounts that will vary the cost of my wedding. They're input fields. It's a good idea to have them separated from the rest of your spreadsheet, and that way you can fiddle around and change the number of guests and see what your total comes to. So I'm going to put some fixed cost in. Let's say a wedding dress costs $2,000 and a wedding cake costs $500. Hairdresser costs $200. Everything's way more expensive when you get married. And a DJ is going to charge me $300. Once again, I want to put a total in there, so I'm going to add those up using auto sum. Okay, now up here I've got my number of guests. Let's just start off with say 100 guests, and we know that we can fit 10 to a table. So we're going to do equals, and then this one here, the 100 guests, divided by 10. Now, if that ended up being a weird number, let's say I had 105 guests, we're going to end up with 10.5 tables. So what we want this one to do is round up to the next table. And the reason we would want to do that is if we had 105 guests, we'd have 10 tables with 10 people on them and maybe 1 table with 5 people on it. So we want to round that up so that we've got 11 tables. So we can actually round this up here. We type in round up, close that, and then here, and then close the brackets, and it will round it up to the 11 tables for us. So I'll just take you back to that cell there, equals, round up, open brackets, have your formula, comma, close the brackets, and then it'll actually round it up to the next whole number. Okay, so we'll go back to 100 guests for the moment. Okay, so we put some variable costs in. Now let's say our reception is going to cost us $45 per person, and our toast, which is the little champagne glasses, we might be able to get, say, that for $5 a person. Invitations might cost $2 per person, and the table decorations would be, say, $20 per table. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to multiply the number of people by the cost per person. Now, what we're going to do is do equals for a formula. We'll take that cost per person, we're going to multiply it by this field here. Now, we don't want to have to retype that formula for everyone. There might be 30 costs in here. We don't want to have to retype the formula every time. We want to be able to click and drag. But the problem with clicking and dragging is that when I drag it down, it's actually going to reference the number of tables instead of the number of guests. I actually want to anchor it so it's only looking at the number of guests. So if I click back in this field again and press F4, your computer might actually do function F4, just have a bit of a play with that. It's going to put a dollar sign in front of the C and a dollar sign in front of the 2. And the reason why it was that it's giving it an absolute value. It's creating like an anchor for that field. And I'll show you how that works. So if I click and drag this down now to invitations, every one of these is still referencing the number of guests. I can check that. It's taking the toast cost and multiplying it by the number of guests. And then down here, it's taking the invitation cost and multiplying it by the number of guests. That's what I wanted to happen. Now, the reason why I put an input field up the top is because if I change my number of guests now, it'll automatically recalculate my cost per person. It'll also recalculate how many tables I need. So you'll notice here it's now saying I need 20 tables. Now my table decorations was per table, not per number of guests. So we're going to equals this one and multiply it by the number of tables. And now we've got a budget for our wedding. We haven't added everything up though, so we need to have a little total here for our total variable costs. Auto sum those. And then a final formula equals the fixed expenses plus the variable expenses. And now we have our wedding, which costs us $13,800. That's a pretty cheap wedding, you can see. In fact, there's a lot of costs that weren't included for that particular wedding event. Okay, we're going to move on to our final example now, which is a project. In this one, I'm doing a kitchen renovation. Once again, I've split things neatly up into fixed costs and variable costs. You may wish to do the same. Now, with renovations, we often hire people and also cost change based on measurements. So I've got here for my kitchen area of the tiles and the paint, and that's a cost per square metre. Also, for the actual tradespeople, I've got their hourly rate, or the number of hours that they're going to take to do the job, and their hourly rate will go in here. So let's start with our fixed costs. I've got my sink, we'll call that $500, the oven $1,500, and the fridge $1,200, and we'll add those together for our total for our fixed costs. Here's where it gets a little bit trickier. Now over here, you've got your tiles. So let's say I've multiplied, I've got 10 metre by 10 metre kitchen. So 10 by 10, 10 metres wide, 10 metres long. And I know that my tiles are going to be going up the walls by 5 metres. So we're looking at surface area here. 4 walls, we need to multiply that by 2, because what we've done here is we've got one wall 10 metres high, 10 metres wide, and actually we're going 5 metres up the wall, we said. And we've got 4 of those walls, so we'll multiply it by 4 walls. That will give me the surface area that's being tiled. And we're going to do the same with the paint, because we're going to go halfway up the wall with tiles and halfway up the walls with paint. But we also need to paint our ceiling, and our ceiling is going to be 10 by 10, so we're going to add the ceiling on as well. Okay. Now we've got a cost per square metre of tiles. Let's call that $30 per square metre. I'm going to put the dollar sign on there so that I can distinguish from my area. And the paint, we'll say that's $10 per square metre for the paint. So now I want a total over here for my tiles and for my paint. So I'm going to do equals the area times the cost. And then I'm going to scroll that down as well using the click and drag function. Okay, so now I've got some costs there. I want to keep it sort of consistent with my format, so I'm going to make everything with the dollar sign. Now the builder is going to charge $60 an hour, and the electrician's going to charge $100 an hour, and the plumber's going to charge $80 an hour. And these should all be costs as well. Now the builder is going to take 40 hours to install the kitchen. The electrician's going to work for 5 hours. The plumber's going to work for 6. So now I need to multiply the cost per hour by the number of hours that they work. So once again, equals the hours times by the cost per hour. Gives me a total charge from the builder. Click and drag that down for the remaining tradespeople. Now you don't want sums all along here, because that would be meaningless. You might want to add up your total area for another purpose. This number here should be a dollar sign, not a percent. And you don't really need to add up your hours. You really just want to add up your total costs. So it makes more sense to organise it properly and to just have your sums in that final column. And now for our final costs, we're going to put an equals in again, because it's a formula. Take the total fixed costs, add on your total variable costs, and you've got a total cost for your kitchen. That's a pretty cheap kitchen renovation. And we're going to put that in bold as well. So we've done 3 worked examples now. I hope that's helped you to understand how to do budgeting in Excel in a variety of different contexts. Well, let's have a quick chat about what's coming up on McClatchy Maths in our consumer arithmetic series. We are going to look at wages and salaries. I was originally going to do that one a bit earlier than this video, but we had some urgent needs with our PSMTs that we're writing at the moment. I'm also going to cover piecework and commission in that video. Then we'll talk about exchange rates, dividends, and GST. I'd also like to welcome all of the new subscribers to the channel. Thank you so much for joining us here at McClatchy Maths. Why not also follow us on Facebook? McClatchy Maths is there as well. And if you want to send us an email with any video requests, mcclatchymaths@yahoo.com. Thank you so much for joining me here. Have a wonderful day.